You get paid on Friday. For a few seconds, the number in your bank account looks like safety. It looks like progress. It looks like proof that all those hours, all those emails, all those early mornings and late nights actually turned into something. Then rent comes due. And just like that, the paycheck gets smaller before your life even begins. The money does not feel like yours. It feels like it passed through you on its way to someone else. The apartment lights are on. The door locks. The roof is above your head. Technically, you are stable, but emotionally, it feels different because rent is not just a bill in America. For millions of people, rent is the first hand reaching into the paycheck. Before groceries, before gas, before savings, before debt, before the emergency fund that keeps getting delayed. And the strange part is this. Rent does not stop trapping people when they make more money. It just changes the shape of the trap. At low income, rent feels like survival. At middle income, it feels like pressure. At higher income, it can feel like success from the outside, while quietly keeping you dependent on the next paycheck. This is educational storytelling, not personal financial advice, and the numbers in this video are simplified examples to show how rent pressure can feel at different income levels. So let's walk through the income ladder. Because sometimes, the real question is not whether you can afford the rent. The real question is what the rent is forcing you to give up. At around $20,000 a year, rent does not feel like a normal monthly payment. It feels like a deadline with teeth. You are not thinking about investments. You are not thinking about building wealth. You are not thinking about retirement accounts or financial freedom. You are thinking about the first of the month. You are thinking about whether the landlord will wait 2 more days. You are thinking about whether groceries can stretch until Friday. At this level, rent does not just take money. It takes mental space. A cheap apartment may still be too expensive. A room with roommates may still feel heavy. A studio that looks affordable online may become impossible once utilities, deposits, application fees, transportation, phone bills, and food enter the picture. That is the first rent trap. The price you see is not the full price of living there. There is the deposit, there is the moving cost, there is the furniture you do not have. There is the gas or bus fare to get to work from that cheaper neighborhood. There is the extra hour you lose every morning because the place you can afford is far away from the job that pays you. So even when the rent is technically lower, the life around the rent can still be expensive. At this income level, a small emergency can feel violent. A tire goes flat, and suddenly the rent is in danger. A shift gets cut, and suddenly the rent is in danger. A doctor visit, a parking ticket, a late utility bill. One bad week, and the whole month starts leaning over the edge. This is where the apartment becomes more than shelter. It becomes pressure. You may not even decorate it. You may not fully relax inside it. You may not invite people over because the place does not feel like a home yet. It feels like a bill you sleep inside. Then income rises. Maybe now you make around $35,000 a year. For the first time, rent may get paid more consistently. The panic is not gone, but it has a schedule. You know which bills hit first. You know which payment can wait. You know which grocery store is cheaper. You know when to avoid looking at your balance, because the number will ruin your mood. From the outside, this can look like progress, and it is progress. But it is fragile progress, because the rent trap at this level does not always look like losing your home. It looks like having a place but no cushion. It looks like paying rent on time and then using a credit card for food. It looks like avoiding the dentist because the lease renewal is coming. It looks like telling yourself, next month I'll start saving, for 12 months in a row. That is how rent traps people at the bottom. Not only by being expensive, but by making escape expensive too. At this stage, the trap is obvious. It sounds like overdraft alerts. It looks like late fees. It feels like counting the days between payday and the first of the month. Then you reach the middle, maybe around $50,000 a year. And this is where rent becomes confusing. Because for the first time, you may not feel poor in the obvious way. You might have a better apartment. You might pay rent on time. You might have a couch that was not found on the curb. You might have a bed frame, a real desk, maybe a kitchen table that makes the place feel like adulthood instead of survival. The panic is quieter now. But quieter does not mean gone. At this level, rent starts wearing a mask. It no longer screams at you. It negotiates with you. It says, you can afford this place. And maybe you can. But after taxes, utilities, car insurance, groceries, phone bill, healthcare, debt payments, and the small purchases that make life feel normal, the money left over may still be thin. You are not drowning, but you are not really moving either. This is the level where people start asking a painful question. Why do I make more money than I used to, but still feel stuck? The answer is often hidden in the gap between income and freedom. Income is the money that arrives. Freedom is the money that stays. And rent is usually standing at the door between the two. At around $75,000 a year, the trap becomes even smoother. Now the apartment may actually look good. Better neighborhood, safer building, shorter commute, parking spot, in-unit laundry, pet fee, gym access, maybe a balcony, maybe a view, maybe a lobby that smells expensive. And none of these things are evil. Comfort matters. Safety matters. A shorter commute can give you your life back. But the danger is that every upgrade feels reasonable by itself. The rent is higher, but the commute is shorter. The rent is higher, but the building is safer. The rent is higher, but you finally have space. The rent is higher, but you work hard, and you deserve to live somewhere decent. And that sentence can be true, but it can also become the doorway into lifestyle creep. Lifestyle creep is not always designer clothes or luxury cars. Sometimes lifestyle creep is simply taking every raise and using it to make your monthly life more expensive before your future gets stronger. You earn more, so you rent better. Then the better rent becomes normal. Then normal becomes necessary. Then necessary becomes hard to give up. That is the middle income rent trap. It does not always feel like fear. Sometimes it feels like finally breathing. But the breathing comes with a lease. If you are watching this and you have ever felt like your income went up but your savings did not, subscribe for more stories about how money quietly shapes ordinary life. Because the middle level is where the trap becomes hardest to explain. At the bottom, people understand panic. At the top, people understand luxury. But in the middle, you can look fine and still feel trapped. You can have the keys, the job, the apartment, the furniture, and the appearance of stability. But every month, the rent still gets first claim on your future. At low income, rent traps your survival. At middle income, rent traps your savings. It does not destroy you loudly. It delays you quietly. Then you reach the level where people expect the story to change completely. Around $100,000 a year. Maybe more. And from the outside, this is where many people think rent should stop being a problem. Because 100,000 sounds powerful. It sounds like comfort. It sounds like the kind of income that should finally make life feel light. But in America, the number on the job offer is not the number you live on. First come taxes, then retirement contributions, then health insurance, then maybe student loans, then car insurance, then groceries that somehow keep getting more expensive. Then the city itself takes its cut through parking, tolls, childcare, restaurants, and higher prices for almost everything. And if the job that pays six figures is located in a high-cost metro area, the rent may rise right alongside the income. So the paycheck is bigger. But the city has a bigger mouth. At this level, rent may not create the same panic it created before. You may not be choosing between rent and groceries. You may not be begging for an extra week. You may not be terrified of one flat tire. That is real progress. But the trap is not always about panic. Sometimes the trap is about dependency. The apartment is nice now. Maybe very nice. There is a gym downstairs, a rooftop, a package room, a coffee shop around the corner, a safe building, a short commute, a neighborhood that makes your life feel efficient, polished, and adult. And the more convenient life becomes, the harder it is to question the price. This is where rent starts acting like a luxury subscription to your own routine. You are not just paying for walls. You are paying for time. You are paying for safety. You are paying for status. You are paying to live near opportunity. Again, none of that is wrong. The problem is when the payment quietly becomes the reason you cannot take risks anymore. You cannot easily switch careers because the rent expects the current salary. You cannot easily start over because the rent expects the old paycheck. You cannot easily slow down because the lease does not care that you are burned out. This is how rent traps higher earners. Not by making life impossible, but by making comfort expensive to maintain. At around $150,000 a year, the system may start treating you better. Landlords respond faster. Applications become easier. You qualify for nicer units. Banks see more income. Buildings offer you amenities that make the whole thing feel like success. But notice what still happens. The system approves you faster because it has more confidence that it can collect from you. Approval feels like respect. But sometimes it is just a smoother way to become obligated. The apartment does not need to scare you anymore. It can flatter you. It can say, this is who you are now. This is the neighborhood you belong in. This is the version of yourself you worked for. And the higher the income goes, the more the rent trap becomes psychological. Because now, moving backward feels like failure. Downgrading feels embarrassing. Living farther away feels like losing status. Having roommates again feels unthinkable. Choosing a cheaper place feels like admitting the old dream got too expensive. So even when you technically have options, your identity may reject them. That is the strange cruelty of upper-income rent pressure. The cage has better lighting. The view is beautiful. The lobby is clean. The appliances are new. But the lease still resets every month. And every month, the first question remains the same. Can this lifestyle keep being paid for? At low income, rent traps your survival. At middle income, rent traps your savings. At higher income, rent can trap your identity. Because once your apartment becomes proof that you made it, leaving it can feel like becoming smaller. That is why rent can follow people up the income ladder. It changes from fear to pressure to performance. But it is still there, standing between the paycheck and the future. The final reveal is that most people do not think they are renting a trap. They think they are renting a life. A safer life. A cleaner life. A more adult life. A life closer to work, closer to friends, closer to restaurants, closer to opportunity, closer to the person they were trying to become. And that is why rent is so powerful. Because rent rarely sells itself as a trap. It sells itself as the next version of you. At the bottom, rent says, pay me or lose stability. In the middle, rent says, pay me and feel normal. Near the top, rent says, pay me and look successful. But underneath every version is the same quiet truth. Rent is a monthly vote on how much of your income belongs to your present life and how much is allowed to escape into your future. That future might be an emergency fund. It might be a down payment. It might be debt freedom. It might be retirement. It might be the ability to quit a job that is breaking you. It might be the ability to move, pause, breathe, choose, recover, or say no. And this is where the original question comes back. Why does rent keep trapping people, even when they make more money? Because many people do not just rent up to their income, they rent up to their identity. A raise does not only increase what they can afford, it increases what feels acceptable. The old apartment starts feeling too small. The old commute starts feeling insulting. The old neighborhood starts feeling like a past version of life. And sometimes that is growth. But sometimes it is a cage being upgraded so slowly that you never notice the door locking again. This is not about hating rent. Rent can be useful. Rent can provide flexibility. Rent can save you from repairs. Rent can help you move for work, leave a bad situation, avoid being tied to one place, or live in a city where buying is completely unrealistic. The danger is not renting itself. The danger is not knowing what rent is taking in exchange. Because every apartment gives something and takes something. A cheap apartment may give lower rent, but take safety, time, energy, and distance. A mid-range apartment may give dignity, but take saving speed. A luxury apartment may give comfort, but take flexibility, risk-taking, and future options. And the hardest part is that the trade often feels invisible while life is going well. You only see it clearly when you want to change. When you want to leave the job. When you want to build savings. When you want to start something new. When you want to help family. When you want to move cities. When you want to stop living so close to the edge. That is when the apartment stops looking like a place and starts looking like a contract with your future self. So here are the 3 takeaways. Takeaway 1. Rent is not just the price of shelter, it is the first claim on your income. Before your savings grow, before your debt shrinks, before your emergency fund gets stronger, before your future gets room to breathe, rent usually gets paid first. And the larger that first claim becomes, the less flexible everything else becomes. Takeaway 2. Making more money helps, but it does not automatically create freedom. You work harder. You earn more. You finally qualify for a better life. Then suddenly that better life becomes the new minimum. What used to feel like luxury becomes normal. What used to feel normal becomes unacceptable. And now the higher income does not feel like freedom. It feels like the price of staying who you became. Takeaway 3. The goal is not to hate renting. The goal is to know when rent is buying flexibility, and when it is quietly buying your future from you. Sometimes renting gives you mobility, safety, convenience, and time. But sometimes rent becomes a beautiful monthly excuse for why the future has to wait. The emergency fund can wait. The debt payoff can wait. The career change can wait. The rest can wait. The life you said you wanted can wait. All because the apartment you live in today has become too expensive to question. So maybe the real question is not, can you afford your rent? Maybe the better question is, after rent is paid, can your future still afford you? Comment below. What income level do you think rent finally starts feeling less stressful in America? Because for some people, the answer is $35,000. For others, it is $75,000. For others, it is $150,000. And for some, the shocking truth is that it never feels less stressful at all. Sometimes, the most expensive thing in your apartment is not the rent. It is the version of your life you keep postponing to pay it.